And then with that, Lucia, do you want to go ahead? So the history of it, and I'll hand it off to specifically, we can provide the history of the facility specifically, or do we also want to have a discussion on the history of the public outreach, or should we take those two separate? And that's why we have individuals from the public participation space so they can provide a little context. And then also we have program staff that can provide the history on the facility itself. So I just wanted to see what's helpful.
Others feel free to chime in, but what I was thinking would be helpful is just kind of getting an overview of how BTSC is involved in this facility and kind of how, and just kind of an overview of all the involvement, including the strategies that have been used for public outreach, just so we don't miss anything and we could be informed of everything that has gone on just related to this project.
Okay, so with that though, if that sounds like a space, we can even have Alan. Do you want to start?
Yeah, again, my name is Alan Plaza. Thank you for having us. I'm a unit chief in the Chatsworth cleanup program. We oversee the cleanup of this site. This is our third removal action work plan for this particular site. Again, that's removal action work plan, the short for RAW. This site used to be a manufactured gas plant over 100 years ago. And it is about 8.3 acres, about 4.3 in the southern, and the rest of them are the northern. The manufactured gas plant was located in the northern portion of the parcel. And these were, again, two RAWs, removal action work plan, have been approved for that northern portion. This is the third. It's located in the southern portion, and it is to deal with the contamination, again, left over from manufactured gas plant in the over 100 years ago. And we found some, contaminants, the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and some heavy metals like lead and arsenic. So we have a, again, voluntary agreement with the gas company. They want us to oversee the cleanup of this particular site. And so that's what we did. We reviewed, we went back and forth to make sure that they properly delineate the area of contamination that needs to be cleaned up. They submitted their RAW. We provided that for public comment, and we approved that on March 2nd, I believe. So, Marcia, you want to?
Sure, I can speak to our outreach over the time that we've been providing oversight for SoCalGas. So, like Alan said, we've done a few different cleanups there previously. And, we start our outreach with a community survey. And, up until for the past couple RAWs and even in this one, we didn't receive a lot of initial response. And so usually when we don't receive a lot of initial response, we basically just follow the regulations related to outreach. So we just do, whatever outreach activities are in regulation. Now, in this case, that was the plan. That plan should have changed when we got more, engagement, when we got requests for community meeting. And that definitely was an error, absolutely, on our part. And I'm coming to this a little bit late in the game. But if people request a meeting, if people want to engage with us, our goal is to be responsive and engage, give you a meeting, give you the space to, talk to us, ask us questions, get more, have more of a conversation about, what's taking place. And so absolutely, that was an error. That's why, that's why we're here with you now. That's why we're attending the SoCalGas meetings. That's why we're talking about planning another meeting. Because if we have people who want to be engaged with us, then that's our goal, is to be responsive. And so, you know, when we have very limited initial response, we just move through the project and do what's required. When we work with communities who do want to get engaged, then we expand that, and you know, we hold public meetings. We bring in more team members to help facilitate that conversation. And so, you know, that's what we're trying to do now. As far as planning, a meeting in the future, right now, from the information we have, the requests we've received, the information we received, we haven't had anything that would indicate reopening the comment period and holding a formal hearing. That doesn't mean that the information can't change the course of the RAW. And if we do, if we do get information, if we do have questions that bring up further research, something that would change the technical aspects of the RAW, that is absolutely still, open for discussion. So I just want to make sure that everyone here understands that, that everything is set in sponge until, we move forward. Even sometimes when cleanups begin, things are found during that process that change the course. And so, nothing is set in stone, nothing is finalized. And, we're grateful that we get this opportunity with you to talk about how we can have a productive relationship moving forward. And Liz, I saw you had your hand up, so I didn't want to say anything further until we heard from you. Oh, you're muted. I know we all need that hat right now that says you're muted, right? We're
Yes.
like, fine.
Okay. I had a question for clarity to Alan, because it seemed he indicated that this particular RAW is regarding the southern part of the property. But last week or the week before, the time is moving fast on this. I can't tell you the date exactly, but they began digging for something else they were doing, but it was on the southern part of the property. And I believe they told us and told our city staff that the cleanup was going to be on the northern part of the property. So this is unimportant. So I'd like to clarify, this RAW that we're talking about is on which portion of the property?
It is the southern portion, and I can provide you the link of exactly where it is. There's a map as part of the RAW, exactly where this contaminated area is located. So it is the southern part.
It is the southern part. Okay.
Yeah.
So when they said it was the northern part of the property, that's incorrect.
That is correct. The northern part of the property, there were two RAWs that were where they did clean up, I believe, in 2011. So this
Okay.
is again the third one in the southern portion.
Thank you for that clarity. So we want to understand that they're giving us proper information, and so that's a little misinformation from SoCalGas. So thank you for that clarity.
And this is a good point too, Liz, and I'll go to Tomas in a little bit, where we can provide clarity on the first RAW, the second RAW, and the third RAW to just kind of have a little bit more of a sense of what has been the history on this property. Because if there's misinformation and clarity that's happening right now, I'm pretty sure that's happening across the board. So I think that's something that, at least for us, we can take that back and then, not assume that people know, and then really clarify that. Okay. So with that, Tomas, and I saw you have a question too. So go ahead if you want to go.
Yeah. I just wrote the question too about like the previous two RAWs, and I don't know if you can bring that at the top of your head or you can get back to us later. But my questions are just more responses to, I understand you might say that now, like from whatever comments we did get or were submitted during the comment period, there might not be enough in there to reopen it. But I think that's probably part of the problem too, that a lot of agencies, like the city, wasn't notified, and this mayor has some questions too from the city staff today. The school district wasn't notified, and we've met with two trustees, the superintendent, and they're like very disheartened by this outreach process because they take pride in notifying parents. They don't spray Roundup, even when they spray vinegar for weeds. They notified parents about that. And they, the union, they haven't been able to tell their staff. So just that lack of notification from a lot of like stakeholders, from the community members to the school parents to the staff. And also, yeah, our community, it's over 70% Latino, and we have a lot of poverty. So there is a huge digital divide, and that's there might be enough responses to the survey to begin with. And it was done during the height of the pandemic too, when mail was very late. So there was a lot of factors that might have got us to this point, but I think the reopening of the hearing is bare minimum we could do to get a lot more of these questions and concerns, and that might have to readjust the raw at this point. Just want to make those points.
Okay, we hear you on that. And two, I think, you know, Marcia can provide a little clarity if that's helpful on how our current process, and if there's anything that we have to look at that and look at any gaps that within the process of outreach, given, you know, because it's a pandemic and we're working with school officials, how that information is being disseminated, right? Because again, it's different in every region, but I think it will be really enlightening to kind of see what went wrong.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing enough, or we thought we were doing enough, but it wasn't what was needed. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, of course. With schools, we absolutely, like, when we work a lot with schools, and so hearing that the district wasn't notified is kind of surprising to me, especially because the school is in the radius. You know, we usually do, like, we start with the folks who are most closely in proximity to whatever site we're working on, right? So the school, like, should have been notified, and I'm surprised if they weren't. And like you said, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so there is a chance that we might have tried to inform the school and not, you know, and had trouble getting through. But when we work with schools a lot. We do a lot of cleanups at schools, because as we all know, schools are built on the least expensive properties we can find, and those are often contaminated. So, you know, we work with the schools to make sure that the staff and the parents are informed. And in this case, we would be working with school, you know, not because we're doing a cleanup there, but because they're right in proximity of the site that we're working on. So if they weren't informed, you know, something got lost in the shuffle there, because they absolutely would be part of just our general initial outreach plan. And I appreciate what you're saying about, you know, having folks in a Latino community that are often, you know, left out when it comes to digital connection. That's part of why we do all of our initial surveys on paper with a QR code and a link to an online survey, so that we can serve, you know, people who are just receiving information via mail, and that's the best method of outreach, which for a lot of our communities is. Most of the people interested in our work are retired folks, because they're hanging out, they get information in the mail, and so we want to be responsive to them and to people who aren't necessarily like checking their email all the time. So if we haven't been able to work with the school, that's something we definitely need to, you know, that's definitely people we need to connect with. And we want to make sure that we are getting the best information to everyone, and making sure they're engaged and involved and aware. So, I mean, maybe like Chen and I can look at that list, see who we missed, see who fell off, and, you know, make sure moving forward that we're working with them, because we're still in the process here. So, you know, it's not, you know, too late to walk that back. And, you know, if it's a Latino community and we have people who have limited English proficiency, I mean, everything has been translated so far, all of the outreach materials, but we can also get some of our colleagues who are bilingual certified to be engaged in the project, to make themselves available to community members who, you know, want to have that conversation in Spanish rather. And so, you know, that we can definitely do better, and we're willing to hear from you about that. And, you know, as far as reopening the comment period, it might be something we need to do, because clearly we haven't engaged people well enough, and we're hearing from you how we can do that. And so that's what we want to do. So, you know, that's a conversation we also have to have with our folks in the cleanup program, because, you know, they're shepherding the raw process. but it's, you know, I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility. And I'd ask, you know, Heisem and Alan to speak to that.
Mhm.
As far as the, you know, as far as a comment period goes. But both Liz's have hands up, so I want to make sure
Exactly.
we hear from both of our Liz's on the line today.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. And if we, Liz Bell, do you want to go? And then Liz Campos? If, oh, I saw Liz.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm sorry if there's some background noise. I'm in my car, but yeah, thank you, Marcia, for sort of, you know, outlining what you know, you're saying there are some shortcomings to the community outreach process, and I really do hope that the natural conclusion of that is to reopen the public comment period, because I do think the lack of information to parents and teachers was a big oversight. Additionally, as an environmental advocacy organization, you know, I went and ahead and reviewed the RAW along with one of our advisory board members, Dr. Steve Colomé, who's an environmental health PhD. And we have some very serious concerns about how this RAW got any preliminary approval in the first place, given the fact that this is a lead contaminated site right across the street from an elementary school playground. And you know the extra special sensitivity that children have to lead poisoning, and this RAW did not contain any pre or post testing of lead laden dust in children's bodies, in soil, in groundwater. And just that lack of baseline testing would mean that after the soil were complete, if the remediation were complete, there would be no way to know if that activity contributed to the lead burden in children's bodies. And that is a really, really important thing to track, especially in a community that has multiple environmental health burdens already. So just really, really concerned that DTSC approved any of this in the first place without an adequate look at children's bodies and their health. Really, really concerning.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Alan.
So I don't know how you want us to respond to it, whether or not that's a reason for reopening the comment period, but we've looked at it really carefully, and the amount of lead that's found there. First of all, it's not, I believe there was only one sample or so that we found lead, and they're proposing to clean it up to even residential level of 80. So the lead is not heavily contaminated with lead, the site, I mean, relatively speaking. And there's going to be, you know, measures that are being spelled out in the RAW to minimize those dust emissions so that it won't get outside the property boundary. So if there's any suggestion that you have that that's not in the RAW, would be happy to, you know, respond to any concerns, any comments that you have.
We have a number of suggestions that would probably be best submitted in writing. And again, if there's a public comment period, we could make them there. But yeah, we have a lot of suggestions.
Yeah. With or without reopening the comment period, I would love to get those comments from you, so I could.
Okay, you know that they were submitted in CFROG's letter. I don't know if you received that. So when DTSC was asking for comments, CFROG submitted a letter with Dr. Steve Colomé's list of recommendations included in it, but we received the same form letter response that everybody else did. So I don't know if you ever personally got a copy of that.
I believe this was part of the comments during the comment period. We did prepare a response to comments to every comment. So it wasn't a form, you know, response. It was something that was specific to the comment that we received, and it was based. Our response was based on the RAW that was that we approved. So if you think you know, our response was inadequate, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you, or to get additional specific comments that you want us to address. But
Mhm. And what I will add too, Liz, if it's, and this is where I think submitting, even resubmitting your comments, and it will be good for us to even see what the response, because if you're saying that the response that we provided wasn't sufficient, obviously that's something that we have to look at. And, you know, what I'm hearing from Alan is there was a response specifically to your letter. So it's like trying to really reconcile kind of those elements. I think being able to actually see, you know, even for our end, what we provided to your response, but, you know, if there's any additional information that has been modified since that comment was submitted, that will be helpful, at least on our end too.
Yeah, I'm happy to specifically resubmit Dr. Colome's recommendations. I think they're extremely important, and no, they were not responded to in that letter that everyone received in return.
Okay. Okay. And that's, you know, I think that this is something that will be a point of, you know, a discussion. If, you know, I'm hearing from you, that was the concern, is how do we insert that within, you know, this public meeting, right? So let's think about kind of how do we answer that within, you know, this meeting that we are basically considering, like what's that agenda going to be looking like? And that can be a question in there too. And then I saw the mayor include a couple questions. So I don't know, Mayor, do you want me to, I don't mind reading them, or do you want to, if you want to go ahead and write them?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I would just put them in the chat, just think we have time. And if we don't have time for that, then maybe to email, but I thought I would just go ahead and include them in the chat. And if you have answers for some of them, I would love to hear the information that you might be able to provide.
Okay, we'll see. You know, I'll definitely hand off. I was like, let me see how, you know, how quick I can go and screen them. But if Alan or China or Hassam, if y'all want to provide a little bit more context on the questions, if not, we can, you know, definitely follow up in writing. Or again, this can be, again, the template of these are the questions, or what questions should we start kind of rising to questions that we should consider and with the public, if there's similar questions that folks are hearing, right? So I'll have Alan and Chan like kind of take a moment and look at the questions. And then there's Jonathan with his hand raised. So I don't know if you have something else.
I'm reading the comments right now. So,
Okay.
the first one is soil cleanup proposed protective of groundwater. The answer to that is yes. The proposed cleanup levels is basically to background. And in fact, for lead, you know, it's residential levels of 80 milligrams per kilogram, which is, you know, the most restrictive standards that we approve for lead. And for arsenic and PAH says it's their background. And the second one, if only limited depth of soil cleanup is required, will remain toxin below cleanup going to spread in either soil or groundwater. Again, the proposed cleanup levels are background. So it's after the cleanup, this site is no different than, you know, the neighborhood, for example. So the short answer is no. It will not going to spread into either soil or groundwater. How clean is clean for the soil cleanup? As I said earlier, it's a background for the PAHs, the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and lead as well as arsenic. And what protective measures are in place for soil cleanup so that during cleanup, neighbors and public are protected from toxin entering the air and being carried out offsite. These are all detailed in the RAW, the Removal Action Work Plan, all the dust control measures that will be implemented during the cleanup, and the rules that they have to follow, specifically the Ventura Air Pollution Control District that has you know, strict requirements on the dust, the PM10, and other contaminants that they need to, other rules that they have to follow. So I'm not sure if I'm able to answer your question.
Yeah,
So-
thank you, Ellen. Yeah, exactly. These are some of the questions that just came up with some of the conversations with our city staff. So as you can see, even our city staff have a lot of questions with regards to the cleanup and how it'll be performed and how it can potentially affect our groundwater and our air and a lot of the other things that the city does have jurisdiction over. So we're just trying to be proactive. And rather than dealing with these types of things on the back end, like waiting until something happens, we want to be as proactive as we can be to make sure that everything is done, up to standards, and just making sure that we're protecting the health and safety of our residents.
No, and thank you for that. And I think for us, even some of the questions, like the last question is, what's interaction with the local air district too, and in the sense of how, again, what's our jurisdiction, scope of work, and how do we partner up with some of these sister agencies? And really is how do we get you the information that you need, even though we're outlining, specific things of like, these are some of the measurements, but then you have another sister agency kind of, having a little bit more jurisdictions, just having that clarity of who needs to go with whom, for everybody's sanity at this point, right? It's where do we start and who ends and who starts from there, from another agency, if that provides a little bit more clarity. I think on the third one, what we can do too, is how clean is clean for the soils contaminants. I know Alan mentioned a quick response, but what we can provide a little bit more, because I definitely emphasis is lay terms, is how do you explain this to somebody who has no background on having a science degree, and that's me, and I am guilty for that, where it's like I need this in kind of just like human terms. So we can provide a little bit more on that of how, what is the clean aspect, and we can talk about cubic feet and how, what is 3.5 feet versus 10 feet, or et cetera, and how those interactions actually conflict with the soil and the groundwater. And that's what I'm hearing from this group, where it's like we want to get those measurements, and also it's what is the standard, and then what is the cleanup that we're doing, and at what level, and why the cleanup occurred. Is that just based on these questions? Is that, because again, I don't want to assume, is that kind of the main objective of some of those questions?
Yeah, at least with regards to some of the questions from the city, because we have jurisdiction over the water, et cetera. So we want to make sure that we have information with regards to those things. I know that there's a lot more questions that residents have, the community has, and I as a resident of this neighborhood have. So these were just a few examples of some of the things that came up with city staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was just
regarding the groundwater, metals, arsenic and lead are not mobile. There's not much concern about issues that could. It's very unlikely that any of these contaminants will be reaching groundwater there. And as in all the cleanups that we do, we take very good measures in regards to dust, and in every project that we work on. So we have all these plans, and this is normal. It's a standard normal procedure that we follow all the time in these removals. And we will be more sensitive since there's a school nearby. I think this is very important. The issue about lead that some of you have brought up is very sensitive to us. And even though there's no public comment period, we will continue taking comments and complaints from the community. And we will continue to do this even during the cleanup. And we will give it a lot of attention, and we will respond to it and keep doing it. So even if there's no public comment period, we have decided in this case, because of the community attention and because of the schools, we will be responding, we will be involved, we will be communicating with the community, with the city, with all the stakeholders, whether before any cleanup can occur or during. So we can give you that commitment. on this.
That's really great. And I think these are all examples of like, you know, just concerns from a few groups. So we definitely are not like the entire community. We're not able to capture everything in this conversation. And I believe some of your staff is aware that, you know, there was a really large mobilization this weekend of community members that showed really deep concern. And so I think what would be the most helpful is, yeah, like a formal reopening of public comments, a formal public hearing that is as accessible as possible to the community. I think in this moment in time, this conversation is great and we're getting information that's helpful, but at the end of the day, it's around informing the community that's going to be directly impacted. And yeah, the thing that we would need the most, that would be the most productive and the most helpful from your agency, is just that formal reopening. And that's something that we want to ask you, can you make that happen?
Again, as Haisam emphasized, you know, just because the comment period ended doesn't mean that we're going to stop listening to or responding to community's concern. So let's say even if we reopen it and then after it ended, if more comments come in after that, we're still going to respond. So I don't want you to think that your window is going to be closed, and you won't have the opportunity to let us know your concern. We will be listening to your concern, even if the comment period has ended.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. No, thank you for that, Alan. And there's a couple questions in the queue, and then Jonathan has been waiting to ask this question. I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to go before we go into the list of Tomas's question.
Okay. My name is Jonathan Allman. I'm from the Sierra Club. I've seen many of the comments, many of the responses that the agency gave to the commenters, and I have to tell you that I was completely dissatisfied with them. I felt like they were rote responses. They were kind of dismissive. They all seemed to say the same thing. It was like a copy and the paste. And you know, the idea that you're saying that it was adequate, I don't believe that at all. There were a lot of concerns, and that should be opened up to the public again. I mean, everything that you're saying is fine, but I mean, think about it. The school didn't know. How can you say you want to reach out to the school when the school didn't know? And this school was built in 1930. And there was a big parade on the avenue on January 3rd, 1930. And when they opened up this school, the operations had been happening at that gas facility, also their oil operations as well. And this has gone on now for 90 some years, and SoCal Gas hasn't cleaned up the site until now that they want something, right? So now we're at this point where we've got this site, you've identified PAHs, arsenic and lead, and we know it's a windy area. We know it's right across from the school, and not only that, it's right across from the Boys and Girls Club. How can you not open up this process again? Because obviously nobody knew about it. And I don't know if you didn't want people to know about it, but nobody knew about it. So we need to open this process up. I'm sorry. When I heard, I wanted to be a little happier, but when I heard your responses, and then when I remembered back to what I had seen in those emails responses, it's completely different. It's a completely different situation.
And just to kind of, and thank you for sharing that, and just acknowledge that I think earlier, and I wasn't sure if you were aware of this, but we're open and, you know, and having a public meeting, you know, and considering the comments, we're definitely open on that. I think for us is what in our process at the beginning of this year, where we typically go through our public outreach process, was that enough, and where were the gaps? So trying to figure out, there was obviously gaps, and this is why we're here, but I think in trying to really figure out how we can actually improve on those gaps, But then moving forward is, yes, let's have this hearing, because I do agree. I think we all agree that it's really critical for us to kind of listen to the community. Is how do we do it in a way that we're also not ignoring there was a process that wasn't working, and how do we learn from that? And I think that's where it's a little bit more of, you know, working with the schools of, were they aware of our notice, or they didn't receive the notice? Because that's something that I would want to know. What was the gap there, and how we were able to fill in the gap as we move forward? Because if this is something that we do not just with this region, but with other regions throughout the state, so if other regions are experiencing similar failures, and how do we correct that? But then, you know, how do we correct what's happening now? And then moving forward is, yes, let's go ahead and have a public meeting. And, you know, and from there is, how do we actually have that meeting be a little bit more informative to the communities, right? And I think this is really the purpose of this call of, if we are going to be having a public meeting, I'm hearing, you know, from, you know, the mayor, these are some of the questions that the city has, you know, can you help us? There might be other questions that, you know, like Lucia mentioned, that the community might have that we're not even aware, and the responses that were given were not adequate. Then from there is, how do we solve for that too, right? So that's I think what, you know, personally I'm getting from this. And I think, you know, some of the, you know, conversations that we have had is, yes, we had a public comment period, and with Alan and Hassan, even after that public comment period, if that, you know, period ends, we still want to hear from, you know, the community, even though the comments I received during that period weren't, you know, the amount of comments that we're receiving now. Is, let's still hear from the community, and that period shouldn't be defining how we are able to move forward, right? So just to provide a little clarity on that. And then on that, I know Liz Bell, you indicated regarding, has anybody determined if the building slated for demolition contains asbestos? And I know, Tom, you indicated you had the same question. I didn't want to assume if that was, you're echoing that question too, but so that's a question regarding the building that has been, or it's going to be proposed to demolition. Alan, I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I believe there's asbestos in the building, as far as I'm aware of, but we are not the agency that oversee the demolition of building that contains asbestos. The Ventura Air Pollution Control District is the lead agency that oversee the demolition of asbestos containing buildings.
And there are EPA guidelines as well, right?
I'm sorry?
Asbestos. There are EPA guidelines as well on asbestos removal.
The U.S. Environmental Agency, you mean?
Yeah.
No.
I just want to comment to that, because that's a big concern too, because just recently we did a records request to the APCD, and one of the recent violations of SoCal Gas was 2016 for improper asbestos removal of a structure too. So like, unless it's spelled out in the raw and work plan, we have clear answers. Like, these are just the tip of the iceberg of questions that we have, and we still, like, I think it's bare minimum, like the comment period and a hearing should be reopened. Like, I don't think it should be really debated at this point. It's kind of disheartening to think that, like, oh, we can still take comments, but the cleanup could have been started by now. So like, you'd be taking comments after all the cleanup had already started. So before anything even happens, I think we still want a clearer timeline right now, but also just how we're going to have that hearing and get more into that discussion, because we can go on for these questions too and get into in depth, that these are concerns that are not just made up, like they're written violations that are just recently 5 years ago. So yeah.
So with that, that's a good segue regarding the timeline moving forward on the cleanup process. And then, you know, how is this public meeting going to fit in that, so we can move to that. For my own clarity, is the demolition of the building, and this is a question to program staff, is that something that we oversee regarding demolition of the building and asbestos? Or is that another jurisdiction by another sister agency?
No, it's not ours. It is the Ventura APCD, the Air Pollution Control District. In fact, there's a rule 62.7 that details the requirements for demolition and renovation for asbestos containing buildings.
Okay. So that's something, and thank you, Alan, for that. I needed to get that for my own clarity, that is that the department's jurisdiction, but it seems that's the Ventura Air Quality Management District. And just for the folks, the groups, has that been a conversation between the local air district regarding demolition of the building? Oh, Liz or Jonathan, I'm not sure.
Well, one thing is, you're the Department of Toxic Substances, and asbestos is clearly toxic. So that's part of why we bring it to you. It was not included in the RAW. Are they required to make a completely different remedial action work plan for the air quality district? Or does yours pass on then to them?
Good question. Alan,
Yeah.
Hassan?
All demolition that's for buildings that contain asbestos is the purview of the APCD, the Air Pollution Control District. DTSC is not involved in overseeing any demolition of this type of buildings.
Thank you.
So how do we interact? Just for my clarity, because I think you bring a good question, Liz, where do we end and where do they start? Or do we start at the same time? So as we are obviously looking at the contaminated soil, is the local air district working on the demolition of the building and also obviously ensuring that the asbestos is being taken, basically remediated accordingly?
Usually they need a permit with the air district to conduct that demolition, of asbestos. And we can communicate with the air district and, encourage them to listen in. And they're usually, at least South Coast here, I know this is a different district, but South Coast usually is very responsive. I don't know about in Ventura, Alan. I don't know how's your experience with them, but they're pretty good. They're pretty responsive. They're very strict, and you need a permit. So if you want to demolish something that has asbestos, they have to permit that, and they go through a review, they go through a plan and all that. So it's not just, it's their jurisdiction, but they do have a process they go through, and it's a very strict process. I just wanted to clarify something Jonathan said. You indicated that there were issues that you were not satisfied with the responses. We would like to hear exactly which ones, and we'd like to get more details on that from you.
All of them. You just have to read the responses. They're like one on top of the other. It's like cut and paste answers. And sorry, we already had the hearing, and you had plenty of time, and that's it. I mean, it was ridiculous. That's all I have to say. I don't need to send them to you. Just read them.
Okay.
No, I mean, when we hear a comment, we would like to know exactly, where and how. This way we can respond to that. And when you say all of them, so we're going to go through all of them and try to guess here and see which ones, that you're talking about. So anyway, I mean, we would like to hear precise comments. I mean, if you don't want to, that's fine. But, it will make our lives easier to respond, to interact,
Okay.
and this is what I encourage, people to strictly say, this is what I don't like, and why I don't like it, or why I don't think it's good. It will help us. It will help us better respond and accommodate your questions and your comments.
Okay. Well, it was like a computer was like writing the answers. That's the way every one of these answers were. I mean, okay, I'm not going to debate you. We're on a Zoom call. I don't have all the comments in front of me, but I can just send them back to you, or you can read them and you can decide yourself. I'm just saying that this agency has, when I read them, I was willing to give the agency benefit of the doubt that they were taking this seriously, but I kept thinking to myself, no, this is just, they're just rubber stamping this, and that's all.
So I think what I'm hearing from Tom, it will be helpful. Just we don't need a lot of if a lot of them were just robotic responses, I think just highlighting them, hey, this was not sufficient, can you provide a little bit more clarity? I think it will be helpful just for Hassam and program staff to kind of see a little bit more of we need more here, that was not sufficient, just for the conversation to move forward. But I think any input will be greatly appreciated, Jonathan, on your end, or anybody from this call too. With that, we have just quick time check, 5 minutes. I know the timeline conversation about cleanup and where we're at. Alan, do you want to provide a little bit clarity on that before we move forward?
Yeah, they're expecting to start in July, and the cleanup takes about 90 days to complete.
Okay. So do we know a specific time frame in July, or just a general, like in July, mid-July, or end July?
Again, July is still tentative, so
Okay.
we don't know exactly when.
Okay.
And so if we were able to move forward with reopening comment period, opening a public hearing, would that cleanup be pushed back? That July date?
That's a good question, Lucia. Alan or Hassan, in the sense of how do we integrate the comments, what I'm getting from you, Lucia, in regards to that cleanup that's going to be scheduled for July. So how are the comments being provided going to be integrated into the cleanup, right? How can you provide a little clarity on Hassan, Alan, specifically on, let's say if we get comments starting tomorrow and we get comments for like 2-3 weeks, how are those comments going to be integrated into the July schedule?
Again, that depends on what the comments and whether or not the comments involve modifying the approved cleanup. If the comments is just, trying to clarify something, for example, there's no need to delay that cleanup. But if for some reason the comments is going to drastically change the cleanup, then that's potentially something that we would, reopen the comment period for this for the raw. But again, we have projects where when we go in or when the RP implements the raw that they find that it was inadequate, and there's a process for that. We would, if the approved cleanup is not the same one as the one that was implemented, we would notice the public. There's a process for notifying the public saying, hey, this is what we approve, but this is what's changed during the implementation. Here's the public notice. And if you have any comments to that, you could provide comments as well. So it's not, one and done. It's for some sites, it's a continual evaluation whether or not the cleanup goals are being met. Because if we have a goal to clean it up, we believe that it's going to be accomplished by the methods that we approve in the raw. But if for some reason that's not going to happen, then we'll find a way to ensure that the cleanup goal is achieved.
So I understand that there is a plan and this kind of like a standard practice, and I get that, and I kind of heard that from Alan's comments. But I think where our concern is that the community doesn't feel like it's been adequately informed around what are the potential threats of this facility, what are all the contaminants that are going to be exposed throughout the cleanup. I understand that at least on your end, it doesn't feel like very significant. Maybe that's not the best word, but I think what we're trying to communicate is that before a cleanup should start, we feel like a public hearing will create an opportunity for better communication and information to the community, and that they're owed that before a cleanup, before ground is broken, that people just want to know and have information about what's going on, what's happening in their community. And so, yeah, I understand that the cleanup is kind of like a standard practice. It's kind of just methodological, but we really just want to make sure that this whole process from the beginning is providing just as much engagement to the community as possible.
Okay. And given that it's 11 o'clock and just being mindful, I can personally stay for a couple more minutes, but just doing a time check on everybody's time. If they want to stay 5 to just to close it out and kind of next steps. There's just still a lot to cover, you know, and I feel like we can just kind of outline next steps and then from there and see if, and you just brought a good question, you know, point, Lucia, in regards to, is we want to open the public comment period, but again, how is this going to affect? And what I'm hearing from Alan, like there's different trigger points that if the plan is going to get modified, by default, you can't start a cleanup if the plan is being modified. That's my understanding, Alan, right? If we have to open up the raw again, that
Diana, there are two issues. Okay, the cleanup, the way we do the cleanup, you know, the cleanup alternative, the remedial alternative, and there are mitigation measures. Okay, if you want to modify the cleanup, we need to modify the raw. If the issue and is related to mitigation measures, this could be modified without reopening the work plan, the raw. So it seems like most of these comments and interests are more in the mitigation measures. If we feel that the remedial alternative is going to be changed or is going to be modified drastically, or it's going to be, you know, the integral part of it will be modified, then we definitely need to reopen it and we need to revise the work plan. So we cannot answer now, we cannot have an answer, but definitely we're going to be looking at all the input that we received today, and we're still receiving from other community members, and then we'll make a decision based on that, you know, how we're going to deal with this. But we, like I said, we are open for comments, for specific comments, for anything related to remediation, mitigation, anything that the community we are interested to hear. And we're not going to do the cleanup before there's some type of satisfaction, you know, that all these comments and issues are addressed before we allow this cleanup to happen.
Got it. Okay. If I'm hearing, and hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity, Lucia, where there's two pathways, right? There's the opening of the raw because of the cleanup. But if there's mitigation efforts that need to be in place for the cleanup to occur, that can actually still happen with the current raw. And if not, then we have to open up the raw, modify how the cleanup is conducted. In addition, you can consider mitigation efforts too at the same time, but that's going to expand the timeline, at least in changing the raw, right? So at least those are two pathways I'm hearing from Hassan. So we can consider if after hearing from the comments of like, is this more of a mitigation efforts? Is it mitigation and opening of the raw, or is it both? Right. And this is something that obviously after getting a little bit more of from the community, and obviously what we're hearing from the city and the mayor is there's still a lot of questions and trying to figure out where those questions lie within those two basically options, and then how do we move forward, right? So Liz, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I just want to emphatically say, because so many members of our community, we're just the leaders of some of the organizations. So many members of our community were never notified prior to us learning about this, that you really should be obligated to open the public comment period and then address those comments the best way you can. You would decide whether or not to change the raw after that. That's your job. But we really, I mean, for me, I'm just demanding an opening of the public comment for all of the members of this community who've been left out in the cold.
Right.
I mean, I announced a meeting with 1 week advance notice, and 225 people came. And those are people who have computers and have Zoom access. Most of our community does not. So please, reopen it and do it right this time for us.
Exactly. And I just want to say, yeah, it feels like it's a chicken and an egg thing. It's like, if you give us enough comments, then we're going to reopen it, but we need to reopen it and notify people so we can get those comments and we can have that time to have our experts and other organizations to look at it and inform people. So like, that should just be the starting point. I don't think like we have to like really prove ourselves that there's more comments and things that need to be notified for it.
Yeah, and you know, I don't, and definitely almost, I don't want to seem like we had to prove, and that's why I think we started with like, we're open in having a public meeting. I think it's how we can be effective in that public meeting in the sense of like that outreach that needs to be conducted. And I know you mentioned there's a couple other school districts, the teachers union, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably not in our docket, but it's how do we make it, you know, in a sense for everybody to be aware, who needs to be aware, and then for folks to know, hey, this is what we're looking at, and how do we provide the necessary tools for individuals to actually maneuver themselves in that, right? So that's where I think, you know, we're like, let's do it. And I know there's going to be meetings happening with SoCal Gas this week and the next week that they're going to be putting forward, and we're going to be there, you know, to my understanding, and I'll hand it off to Marcia, to just provide a little bit more clarity. But I feel what I'm hearing from folks, that's not enough for a forum. And you know, which is fine, but it's like, what are the questions that should be answered by SoCal Gas, right? And then that's where it's like, there's questions that we're able to really provide a little bit more clarity, and there's questions that SoCal Gas can provide a little clarity. After those meetings, we can kind of gauge on, okay, we have to focus on this during the public meeting, and obviously that warrants another meeting between this group to really get a clarity on how that agenda will look like. But in the sense of, you know, if we do open it up, what will be the elements that the community wants to see, right? And how do we provide like a history on X, Y, and Z, or, you know, and then we can go into a little bit more details on that. But I know the mayor has her hand up. So do you want to, I don't know if you have a comment or question.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. You know, I just wanted to mention that during these times, there's a tremendous mistrust of government and government organizations. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, as a member of a government organization, I think our mistake is that we don't communicate enough, we're not transparent enough, and that makes people think that we're hiding something. So I think it would be, if you reopen the public comment and have a public hearing, I would think that would be a tremendous show of good faith and letting people know we're not trying to hide anything from you, we're not being shady. So here's the information, here's your opportunity to ask questions. And so I would just encourage you to think about that. I know that we as a city have dealt with that, and we've had to go back and be like, okay, let's reopen things. Mm-hmm. And I would just encourage you to think about that. And we as a city would also like for you to reopen the public comments and hold a public hearing, because a lot of those questions are coming to us. We don't have answers for those questions from residents. And so we would like to work with you that we have a forum where those questions can be answered.
So, so I wanted to just share a little bit about our process so that we're actually meeting the goals and the needs of being able to engage and answer questions. And when we are in a public comment period and there's a public hearing, we don't necessarily respond because we respond in the formal response to comments. And so like during a hearing, we just take input. And that's it. And we don't necessarily respond because we have to develop the formal response to comments. And so, you know, based on what I'm hearing today, you know, from all of y'all and, you know, program, knowing how the raw process works, I would propose that we hold a public meeting so that we, you know, get everybody engaged and informed, and we can talk about the raw, we can answer questions, we can make sure people understand, you know, what the extent of our oversight is, so they know how they can, you know, how they can inform our process and how they can, you know, contribute to the safe cleanup. And then if the raw does need to, like, if that raw process does need to be reopened based on that conversation, then we can, you know, make a formal comment period and, you know, make any changes to the raw that are needed. Because if we just if we just reopen the comment period, have a hearing and take comments, it's not going to be as fruitful. So I would propose that we start with a public meeting, and do better outreach, more extensive outreach, make sure that people who are interested and should be involved are, and then go from there. If that raw needs to change, if the extent of the raw needs to change, if there's, chemicals that haven't been investigated, need to be tested for, things like that. If any of those kinds of things need to change, then yeah, let's change it. But that would be my proposal, is to start with a public meeting and, go from there, see what we do need to change, how we need to change it, and if we have to have a formal comment period.
One thing, Marcia, I was, since,
Thanks,
we're
Lucia.
listening in that people are saying that there are people didn't know about what's going on. So we want to make sure, when we do this public meeting, we want to make sure,
Right.
and we want you guys to help us maybe further, is to make sure we reach everyone. We reach everyone that need to be, to know what's going on. And this way we can cover everybody, and we don't want to miss out. This is something that concerns me, is when I hear people didn't know about it. This is a concerning, a big question mark for me.
Right.
And for our agency.
School.
Yeah.
So if people didn't know, like, we need to see where that broke down, because we did mail to school.
Yeah.
So, so that would be my proposal. I appreciate, is it Lucia? Did I say that correctly? Lucia, thanks for weighing in as well. So if y'all would be amenable to starting there, I think that would help us sort of, get better engaged together.
Yeah, and given that, and I do want to open it because I know there's a question here, and I don't know, Mayor, if you want to weigh in onto what was proposed, but if that's a first step, trying to figure out, obviously we'll love to convene this group again, and whoever else needs to be convened, for us to really start thinking about this public meeting aspect and how to structure the public meeting. And the bilingual request, we can definitely do that. It's not an issue in our head but I think the question for y'all is, should we have this meeting after the SoCal gas meetings that occur, or during, kind of looking at more planning stages in the next 2 weeks? Because I know the SoCal gas meetings, I think, are, scheduled next week and the following, or this week and then the following week. Should we start the week of the 10th of May? Or should we start the week of, the 3rd? Just trying to figure out more of a timeline from y'all in regards to just capacity and resources.
Diana, I think the 3rd is too soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I definitely think it should be after the Southern California gas meeting, because we will probably get feedback during that meeting, and to know, to make sure we include all these people and these issues, in our meeting. So our meeting will be more, comprehensive and inclusive.
Okay.
I'd rather have that, than we conduct our meeting, then we go to the Southern California gas meeting and something comes up, we don't want to do another meeting. I think it would be important to be inclusive and to keep,
Okay.
to get the best of it. Yeah.
So thank you for that, Hassan. Tomas or the Mayor?
Gabriela, also we want you to know that some of our people are having a very difficult time getting the appointment for the meeting with SoCal Gas. They're having to do 4 or 5 emails, and they're very struggling and to get the information. We're being told you can go to the meeting on this date, but they're not giving us the Zoom link. And then, as I said before, a lot of our community do not have connections. They don't have internet connections.
Chand, can you connect with Southern California Gas and figure out what's going on and relay this information to them? And then maybe you can get back. Liz, do you have Liz's contact information? You can get back with her.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still there, because I sent an individual comment also during the raw open period.
Okay.
We
We
can
will, we
follow
will, we
up.
will, we will get back with you, Liz, on this. We
Yes,
will.
Deanna and I have everyone's contact information, so we'll make sure everyone's
Yeah.
connected to make sure this information is out there.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
And Tomas?
Yeah, I just want to quickly add, I agree, like it should be, we should have a lot of lead time for this to make sure that we're properly noticing it on your side. We can help with, with the information on our side.
Yeah.
And we really didn't want to be promoting these Southern Cal Gas hearings because we're trying to do this to legitimize that they have had a public hearing. And just like Liz was saying, it's a very complicated flyer. It's hard to sign up. And we kind of were a little disheartened too, because they're trying to like tell other people, and well, DTSC is going to be there. So it's trying to like legitimize their hearing. Like this is the hearing that you're asking for from DTSC. So we have a lot of concerns about that hearing, the structure, how they're splitting up English speakers from Spanish speakers at different times. So we can't hear all the same concerns. We don't know if we're going to get a list to all of our responses, how they're going to respond to them. So we have a lot of concerns about those hearings or those meetings.
Yeah. So like generally when we hold our meetings, you know, with communities who have multiple language needs, multiple different access to technology, we do mailers. So we mail out, we email out. We want to make sure the community-based organizations who represent the communities have the information so they can share it in the channels that are working best for the communities. We have interpretation in the Zoom platform. And then we also have a bridge line, a Spanish line where people can just call if they need to just call and have, you know, the information presented to them in Spanish. And so we really do try to make sure that we're, you know, that we're as inclusive as we can be. And so thank you, Tomas, for noting that we would need a little bit of lead time to make sure we have that meeting because of all the, you know, all the coordination that it takes to make sure we have everyone at the table. It does take more than just a couple of weeks, you know, and we like to give people notice as well, because people have a lot on their plates right now. So we want to give like 3-4 weeks notice if we can, you know, so that we're really giving people the chance to participate.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So with that, obviously, we're not going to, you know, again, quick time check, 11:17. Again, super generous for your time. But this is, you know, we're getting a lot of traction done. And, you know, we're not going to land on a date specifically. You know, I'll definitely, you know, have Marcia kind of just take with what she outlined. There's going to be a lot of prep on our end. But this is the way we want to go. I think in providing an inclusive meeting. What would be really helpful is I think if we, you know, the week of the 10th, you know, the following week, or even the week of, you know, the 3rd week of May, if that's something that actually works. And then from there is what's a week that's a preference. I think, you know, for us, you know, having 2-3 weeks for a lot of prep, or even, you know, I'm looking at Marcia, I don't want to speak for her shop, but whatever, you know, I think it's the time that we need to prep, but also what works for y'all as well, to be able to, and it will be one meeting with this, because I saw the SoCal Gas where they have 4 meetings and they're going to be in Spanish and English. Typically when we do, like Marcia mentioned, it's going to be one that's both translated in English and Spanish and whatever other language that needs to be translated. But let us know if that one meeting, obviously, I think what I'm hearing is preferred rather than splitting up the meetings, right? So if that's the case, and okay.
And Mayor has her hand up. You're so patient, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, Marcia, I think that's a great start to have a meeting so that we can get all of this information out there and see what else needs to get done afterwards. I think that's a great idea. It's a great start. The other thing, Hassam, I wanted to let you know that, you know, if we need help with outreach or sharing the information, we as a city want to be a partner. So you can count on us using our social platforms and whatever resources we have to be able to share this date for this meeting so that everybody can be involved. So I just want to offer that.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And I think this is an excellent idea. Appreciate it, Mayor.
Awesome. Okay. So what we can do, and thank you for offering that, Mayor. And what we can do, let's regroup. If we can regroup in a week to 2 weeks, by the end of next week for sure. Yeah, Marcia, I don't know if you had.
Yeah, I mean, let's regroup as soon as possible so that we can outline the plan, because we want to be able to move quickly so that because for us to do a mail out, for us to, you know, prepare everything. Fortunately, we have Zoom now. We don't have to like find a building, but, you know, for us to make sure that we're doing adequate outreach, we need the lead time. So if we can determine a meeting date, you know, and action plan for that, that'll be a great start for us to start getting the word out and getting folks ready to participate.
Okay.
Thank
What do you,
Can I,
oh, go ahead.
can I ask a quick question? So what is the policy right now in regards to in-person meetings, and is that expected to change?
Well, normally our meetings are in person, but with the state of California, we are working remotely until the end of our fiscal year, which is the end of June. And so we would, because we're trying to have this meeting in time to make any changes to the cleanup plan before implementation would take place in summer, want to make sure we get ahead of that. So this meeting, you know, this meeting will happen in May, you know, early June at the latest. So it would be a remote meeting. As far as in-person meeting, you know, we follow the guidance of the state. And so we're basically what the state gives us guidance to do, that's what we follow. And actually having remote meetings like this with Zoom and call-in lines and different opportunities for people to engage with us from wherever they are, we've actually seen an increase in participation and greater access to engagement. So not having the in-person meetings has actually been a benefit to people because, you know, if you're having a Zoom meeting after work, you can still be eating your dinner, you can still be looking after your children, right? You know, whereas if you have to, like, you know, find a babysitter or bring your kids to the meeting or skip it just because of, you know, logistical life reasons, you know, that actually, these meetings actually provide more opportunity for people. Yeah. And, you know, ultimately, when we go back to having in-person meetings, likely there will be a remote access component to them just for that very reason. So I can't say, like, I have no idea right now, Jonathan, but that's kind of the hybrid model that I foresee coming, you know, down the road.
We're definitely in also the comfort level of the community too. I think it's some folks are ready to have in-person meetings and some community members are not ready. So it's like, how do you provide parity on that, right? So, but Lucia?
I was just gonna say, like, as the coordinating and plans are starting to happen, it would be great if the folks that participate in this meeting could, like, continue to be looped in and to give input and feedback. Gabriella mentioned that you have all of our contact info, but I just want to encourage that.
Absolutely.
Good.
What will be really helpful if we can, you know, look at calendars, Lucia, you know, we can take lead, but even for next Monday, you know, we can check in, even just checking in Monday morning or in the afternoon, and we can look at calendars as a quick check-in, and then we can talk about what Marcia mentioned, the date, the times, et cetera, et cetera. And we can actually finalize that during that meeting and a little bit more on the agenda items, if that works too. Will that work?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Definitely.
If not, we're going to go into scheduling craziness. I'm trying to help Lucia, and I'm trying to organize my folks at the same time right now. For Marcia, what do you?
No, I was just going to say, you know, anytime Monday, I'll make myself available, and once I have a clear outline, you know, we can move forward together in developing. Like, I try to nail down logistics first, and, you know, basically meeting date, how, you know, what methods we're going to use to reach out, develop the invitation, and then just get it out as soon as we can. And then we can, once we share that general information, we can work towards building that agenda together so that it's productive.
Good.
Okay. Awesome. So I think it's clear next step. So definitely next Monday, if we can, and it can be earlier, but I think next Monday will give us a little bit more leeway, kind of see how SoCal Gas meetings occur. We're going to be there just listening. Obviously, I think it's good to just have a presence there. But also too is, you know, anything that we can, you know, folks want to bring for next Monday's meeting, you know, feel free, and then we'll go ahead and provide a little bit more clarity on, you know, what works on our end. But, you know, if y'all have a date that works for y'all in the month of May and early June, based on what we're hearing from Marcia, that would be helpful too. Okay. And dates to avoid too. Like
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
not a good week because we have
Right.
graduations. Life happens. I know May is going to be a lot of graduations and for schools and stuff like that. So definitely, if you're hearing from community folks, like please do not do it during this week.
And the time of the meeting time, maybe in the evening, because people are busy in the day. Maybe it's best to do it in the evening.
That works too. That'll be good feedback for us too.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else before we close out?
Thank you
I
for
guess
meeting with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you giving us an extra 25 minutes. That was really generous. But yeah, I look forward to talking again on Monday next week.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy
Next
Monday. Bye.